Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly roundup of stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and coming up, victims, justice, peace and national reconciliation. Central African Republic signs a peace accord with over a dozen militia groups, the 8th such agreement since fighting began in 2013, but the first to come from direct negotiations. Also, Ponzi scheme fund bosses in Benin are jailed for 10 years after defrauding more than 150,000 people. Many lost everything in a case that's been likened to the Bernie Madoff scandal of 2008. And children of nobody. Thousands of children in Burkina Faso live on the streets trying to eke out an existence. Our team visits a shelter in Ouagadougou, trying to give kids care and a sense of community. But first, a hard-fought peace deal between Central African Republic and 14 armed groups will set up a fund for victims of 6 years of conflict in the country and see the formation of an inclusive government. Parties have also agreed to create a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to try and repair some of the rifts created by the violence. Shelley Sitman has more.
Here is the peace deal signed by the Central African government and 12 armed groups, the 8th such agreement since 2012. First part of the text, a series of principles. All groups condemn the use of violence for political ends. The armed groups, which control some 80% of the country, have agreed to dissolve themselves and hand their weapons. Through the deal, their fighters will now be able to join mixed patrols with regular army forces. Meanwhile, their leaders could enter the new inclusive government, one of the deal's most contentious points.
Some of these are responsible of violence committed against the population. Some are war criminals. Sharing power with these outlaws is something a big part of the Central African population will not accept.
Other thorny issue: will criminals who killed, raped, assaulted and looted be tried or walk free? The word amnesty does not appear in the agreement. That was crucial. But the deal does stress that President Faustin Touadéra has the constitutional right to pardon people. And the text goes on to say this could encourage the reconciliation dynamic.
2 directors of an investment firm in Benin have been jailed for 10 years each after defrauding more than 150,000 people out of 150 billion CFA francs. That's around 230,000 euros. Many victims lost their life savings, and the case is the country's biggest ever financial scandal.
The judges took 11 hours to reach their decision. They announced it during the night. It was the biggest financial scandal in Benin's history and has been compared to the Bernie Madoff case in the US. More than 150,000 people were defrauded in a Ponzi scheme. A company called ICC Services lured poor people to hand over their money on the promise of up to 200% per quarter returns. 2 senior directors were sentenced to 10 years in jail. The plaintiffs' lawyers were satisfied.
What we started some time ago has finally worked. It is a relief.
All the people who gave them money but did not hear their names read out today must not worry. The process is not over.
The prosecutor said former President Boni Yayi was also implicated in the organization of the Ponzi scheme. He will be questioned later on by judges at the High Court of Justice. In all, the plaintiffs must be paid over €1 million. A Ponzi scheme uses new investors to pay off older investors.
Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi officially took over as head of the African Union during the bloc's summit in Addis Ababa. During the meeting, he underscored the need for African solutions to African problems. Our team sent us this report from the Ethiopian capital.
Many African presidents attended the AU summit in Addis Ababa. Some of them are facing serious domestic troubles, like the Chadian leader Idriss Déby. He has asked his French ally to bomb armed convoys in the north of the country. Rebels from the UFR group said they were the ones targeted. Déby calls them terrorists.
Do you think they are all Chadians, those who launched the attack?
Where are they from?
I can't tell you now from which countries they came from. An investigation is currently being carried out to determine that.
In the Central African Republic, 80% of the territory is under the control of armed groups, but a peace deal has just been signed with the authorities. President Faustin Touadéra said he would not pardon rebel leaders who had committed crimes.
There will not be an amnesty. Our constitution forbids that. We will fight impunity. But we are working on a judicial process that will help reconciliation.
Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has recently faced angry protests in which several demonstrators were killed.
Total calm has come back to Zimbabwe. We are now so satisfied that this thing was predetermined, pre-planned, well-oiled by both local NGOs who are well funded, but also the opposition, the MDC alliance.
Felix Tshisekedi attended his first AU summit as president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. For now, unlike Mnangagwa, he has not yet had to manage street protests. But he knows he is being watched closely. Many observers, including the African and European Union, had initially expressed serious doubts about the credibility of his victory.
At least 9,000 children are sleeping rough in Burkina Faso. That, though, is an estimate, and the real number could be much higher. Some children are orphans, others have been abandoned by their families, others are runaways. All face risks as they try to look after themselves on the streets. Our correspondent's report from Ouagadougou.
The Samgonde Children's Shelter in the suburbs of Ouagadougou is home to nearly 1,300 children. 80% of them are boys who were abandoned and left to fend for themselves. The children that live here are aged between 4 and 17 years old and have nowhere else to go.
I was collecting cans. They saw me and told me to come here.
I was sleeping at the Eastern train station and people came to talk to me. They said the minister had decided to take care of us and that we had to come to the center to change our lives. After I arrived, I wanted to leave, but they convinced us to stay. I want to become a soldier to defend my country.
The shelter opened just 6 months ago. Staff are trying to rebuild their charges' trust and confidence.
There are orphans, there are delinquents, but there are some that faced problems with their family and were tired of being at home. There are children that had lost hope. They're also the future of the country.
More than half of these children were once beggars or street vendors. The Ministry of Family Affairs wants them to start exploring their options and is encouraging the kids to try out new skills.
It helps to occupy the children. It also helps to detect the children's talents, to help guide them for their future careers. There is carpentry, metalwork, or modern basket making.
The children can stay at the shelter for a maximum of 6 months, so staff at the centre don't have much time to make an impact. But it's a start. Burkina Faso currently has around 9,000 street children. Authorities want to halve that number by 2020.
Now, Kenyan fishermen around the Lake Victoria region struggle to make it out to open water because of the invasion of water hyacinth. The vegetation's carpeted thousands of hectares of lake around Kisumu Bay, killing fish and blocking access to a resource that's vital to the local economy. Locals are frustrated because the weed's rampant growth has been a problem for decades.
Nets piled into their wooden boats, these fishermen are ready to set sail as the sun sets on Africa's largest lake. But once again, a thick green carpet of water hyacinth clogs Kisumu Bay, blocking the fishermen from reaching the deep waters to fish.
We are suffering because as we are unable to go out and fish, we are unable to get food.
Hyacinth is a floating aquatic plant native to South America, but it's become a global freshwater scourge after being inadvertently transported worldwide. It's believed to have first reached Lake Victoria in the 1990s, floating down the lake's western tributary, the Kagera. Since then, it has seriously hampered fishing boats and other vessels on Lake Victoria.
Many of our colleagues have had problems on the lake while fishing. They get stuck there. In the recent past, we've had cases where some fishermen got stuck on the lake, and the Kenyan government had to send a chopper to rescue them.
Lake Victoria is shared with Tanzania and Uganda, but on the Kenyan side alone, hyacinth covers roughly 5% of the water's surface. The plant affects fish reproduction, and fishermen are seeing their catches evaporate.
In the Victoria, the fish was small because there are some weeds in the Victoria. So it forced some people to bring fish from China and some to bring from cages because the demand of fish was high, but the supply was low.
At the market in Kisumu, the gap between local demand and the lake's supply is filled by frozen tilapia fillets, imported from China. But these were banned by the president last year, a ban yet to be enacted. According to experts, this will only worsen the supply-side deficit between Kenya's fish production of about 140,000 tonnes and the population's demand of about 500,000 tonnes.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, and please do so again if you can. Take care.